Welcome to the Tech Insider, where we talk to the people who can give you the insights and trends that matter to you in your business. I'm Christine Grail with Leica Geosystems. Our guest today has been a land surveyor and party chief. He has been a reality capture consultant for more than a decade with his firm, Top Curve Consulting. He's an advisor to the International Association of Forensic and Security Metrology. He's chair for the USIBD, and he is the reality capture senior support specialist for Leica Geosystems. Welcome to the program, Chris Kercheval.
Thank you.
Chris, you have been involved in a number of different projects with laser scanning, with reality capture. What is the craziest project you've ever been involved with?
I think the craziest thing that I've been involved with on the scanning side was a turbine from General Electric that supplied power to the major DC metro area. And during a downage, we needed to get in and do some scanning. And that provided a host of challenges that most normal projects don't present. So that was probably one of the most interesting ones that I've done as a subject area.
I would imagine there were some time considerations with that, probably some significant complexity as well.
Yeah, a lot of it was timing for the amount of days that it was going to be down and trying to get all of the subcontractors in to do all of the necessary work. Just the general scale and size of the unit, plus it being inside of basically a facility that was built around it. So we had to get very creative with access points in order to get the data for the entirety of the turbine. There's so many small little pipes and elbows and little nooks and crannies. Imagine scanning an engine out of your car, but needing every surface area, but multiply that times like 100 in terms of scale. It was just very complex and a lot of scans. Definitely needed a field type of data collector so you can see what you scan to not miss any areas, because it would be very easy with that large and complex of an object.
That sounds like quite the learning experience. Now, you've been spending a lot of time lately, obviously leaning heavily on your background in all different kinds of reality capture, different types of applications for reality capture. You've been advocating for change in reality capture. What needs to change in reality capture right now?
So the biggest change that I see as needing to happen is the creation of a foundation for everyone to work off of. In my work with the USIBD was really looking at comparable industries and how change was either necessitated or a change that occurred that helped that industry grow. And in my research on the automotive industry, it wasn't until the 50s when there was a senator that was tasked with creating a task force to look into shady practices by used car dealers. What ended up coming out of that was the Monroney sticker that we now see on the back left window of every new car that's available. When EVs came out, they modified the sticker so that you can have an equivalent comparison at a glance between 3, 4, 5 products within the same industry, this being automotive. What we're looking to do is, create that foundation that way everyone has the same knowledge base to move forward upon. So kind of like in the engineering realm, you can get a degree in surveying and everyone takes the same basic course. So you have the same foundation. And then as you move along in your career, you would basically enhance and add on to that base knowledge. But in reality capture, there's no base knowledge to be had at the moment.
Well, and you've been part of this field going back more than a decade now. That's when things really started to get interesting, right? Because before then, Leica Geosystems, of course, was at the forefront of the industry. We had the Cyrax scanner to begin with, and then all the way through to the scan station, really set the standard. But then going back about 10 years, that's when You saw the democratization of laser scanning. At one time, you had to be an expert in understanding all the different aspects of it, understanding how to use the software. There were so many things that required so much complexity. And now we're in this environment where it's become much easier to use laser scanning, both the hardware and the software. So much of that now is automated. And so I wonder if that is really the driver for needing the type of change that you're advocating for in the industry.
Oh, exactly. In reviewing 6, 7 years worth of cornerstone reports from USIBD, the users in the field have stated that accuracy, accuracy, accuracy was one of their top priorities. That over the last couple of years has gone by the wayside in favor of speed. And the hardware that's coming out is designed with that user in mind that wants that speed. Absolutely zero issue with collecting more data faster. I think the bigger problem becomes that the newer generation is going to come in and they're very techy, right? They want an app for things, one button, make everything very easy, like the Staples method, right? Just smash one button, that was easy. What's lost is understanding what the machine is doing when you choose from the set options that you have. You no longer have to understand the difference between quality and resolution, and you don't really need to understand as much the reflectivity values in the area that you're scanning. It's just push a button and wait until the results come out. Did I get what I need? Yes, and move on. The understanding of what's actually happening, what the system of systems is doing, has been lost. And that's a fear of mine for the growth of the industry. Is you can't have a bunch of users that don't actually know what the machine is doing.
Yeah, and we've all heard those horror stories, right, of scans gone wrong because you get a company or a person in there who just thinks they can push a button and do the job, and they don't understand what goes into it. And certainly with today's technology, you can just push a button and capture the data, but you still need to have an understanding of what it is you're trying to do. Now, you are a founder of a group called The Committee. Explain that to me. What is the committee? Who's involved, and what are you guys trying to do?
Correct. So the committee initially started as the Laser Scan Committee with USIBD. So we had our committee there. What we found over the years was that USIBD's main audience is professionals that are looking for increased certifications to add value to their knowledge and be able to provide a little bit more to their customer base. So what we saw was that our work is more aimed towards those that are new to the industry. Our focal group would be students that are currently in a geomatics division at university and interested in either going directly into reality capture or a field that uses reality capture as a way of acquiring data for their clients. Either way, the target audience of USIBD and of the committee were not exactly in line, right? We're going more for the new to industry folks, whereas USIBD was aimed at supplemental goods for those already established. So we decided to branch off and create a partnership with USIBD. That our goal is to get in front of the next generation of laser scanners and try to help them all be on the same level initially, potentially get them lined up with internships so they can go into their field of desired area and work with the equipment just like they would on a normal job site, but they're still in school, they're still learning. So that way, when they get that first job, they can literally hit the ground running and know the difference between the settings on any one given unit between, say, phase base and time of flight from any manufacturer. They'll have that knowledge base going in. Then they can become established and then go to the USIBD for things such as a level of accuracy certification and further their career that way. But we're really interested in giving someone a fair head start into their career.
That sounds like a great vision. it also sounds very ambitious. And so obviously you have to start somewhere. What are you focused on right now with the committee? What is kind of the initial steps that you're working on?
So, our main focus right now has been setting up the education committee and doing outreach to universities and colleges that would have an interest in providing a discernible, distinguishing certification factor or something for their students that no other student at the moment can get. We've tried to and are working with University of Oregon, State out of Calgary, and a couple of other universities here in the States to get our supplemental materials included in their existing curriculum. And in doing that, we're going to hopefully be able to expand to more colleges, more universities, and more disciplines. That being the first step in a certification process is just like anything state certified, like real estate. For instance, you would take the test in your state based on going through some classes, passing an initial test, and then going for your certification. We're looking to do something very much the same where we have the educational component where you learn the theory and then we'll have a practical application and then issue out a certification class. We'd be looking to do the certifications in person at a trade show such as GeoWeek, where we would have a module of just certifying people for that half hour, whatever duration that portion would be. But that's where we're looking to go in the very near future. And it's gaining traction, but understandably, it's going to be a slow process.
Now, are you only working with educational institutions that have a survey focus, or is this any institution that's focused on technology? I mean, how are you choosing who you're working with in this?
We would like for it to be available anywhere. But at the moment, we're choosing to get in front of the audience that already has reality capture on the radar. So if they're already in a school that has a geomatics program, that's the easiest step to get our content into the hands of those that are going to be able to utilize it the most is to get in front of those that are already on that forefront now and give them a nice base, solid foundation to work on as their career evolves. They'll understand the difference between phase based and time of flight. They'll understand the drawbacks and the benefits to any one given piece of equipment given the project at hand.
I see a ton of potential for this kind of initiative going forward, though, in any educational institution that is focused on construction technology or industrial technology, anywhere that reality capture can provide a significant benefit where it's applied in the field.
Correct. And we're trying to set up strategic partnerships now so that as this gains traction and evolves, we've already got the groundwork in place to get into other complementary industries. We've partnered with a gentleman named Alex Hanna, who has his own company in BIM called Strive. He's aiming to do very much the same thing, but for the BIM industry. So we've partnered with a downstream industry that if everything goes according to our end goal, reality capture, both in the initial acquisition phase all the way through to registration and deliverable, will all have a client base that is educated on point clouds and how to best utilize the technology.
Very interesting. And just to be clear, when you're saying that we've partnered, you're talking about the committee, which of course is a technology agnostic group of individuals. It's not specific to like a geosystems, but it's great that you are able to participate in that initiative with like a geosystems. And so I think the more manufacturers work together on this, the more value that brings to the industry, right?
Yes, exactly. And we are a conglomerate group of users made up of multiple different disciplines within the reality capture industry. So we try to remain as vendor agnostic or neutral as possible and look at things from the greater whole, right? The whole idea of reality capture being an industry that can cross over to just about anything else. Architects can use a reality capture input, a point cloud, to compare to a design, right? At the same time, we have folks from forestry, and they're trying to collect and understand data on an old growth forest. What effect does something small have to the overall health of the forest? Right. So there's two totally different areas of industry. You have industrial plant. We have some people from that. We have the entertainment VFX area. They're all using point clouds, but for very different end purposes. If you take it all the way back to the beginning, if you don't know how to collect the point cloud for the or collect for the data that you need in that area, you're not necessarily going to come up with the best deliverable possible. It may work, but it may not be the best as what you can get. So that's where, as the committee, we rely on each other and our experiences in those disciplines to help each other and also to come up with testing that would be beneficial to the greatest number of people.
Well, and you mentioned earlier the idea of the sticker on automobiles and how it just lists all the specifications. The consumer knows what they're getting. Everything is the same across the board. It seems like we have a long way to go before we get to that point with reality capture technology. What do you think is needed to get the industry there?
So that I honestly, I wish I had a crystal ball and I could tell you what that answer was. What we've decided to do is to create a spec sheet that is normalized using all of the given information that's provided, but we've just reordered it into an at a glance one page spec sheet where all of the metrics are in the same places. Now, if a manufacturer puts something in a different metric or a different unit of measurement, we don't normalize those, right? We don't know the foundations of the test that got to those results. So we can only go off of the published numbers. So we leave those as is. But the idea being that if someone were to come to the committee and say, hey, we're interested in these 5 scanners, we can provide 5 one-page PDFs that you could lay out in a row and easily compare all of the same metrics because they're in the same places, right? So if one manufacturer gives you 5 pages of information that you don't even know what it is, we're not including that, right? But on the opposite spectrum, you have products that are listed with only an IP rating and whether or not it has Wi-Fi, right? There's very little information. So we show the information that is there, and that way a user can glean the difference between product A and B on just what's applicable to them and to their customer base.
So you already have these sheets available. What has the reception been so far, both on the side of the users of the technology and the manufacturers? What are you hearing?
On the user side, what we're hearing is that it's a much needed change. People are very apt to say thank you for making this easier. They don't have to go to the website, sign up for an email in order to get a download of a spec sheet. And then once they have them, it's a lot easier to digest and make an informed purchasing decision when all of the information is in the same place. It just makes the process a lot easier. Now, from the manufacturer's side, haven't gotten a whole lot of feedback on that yet. What we have is positive, but we understand that there's a lot more involved in the manufacturer spec sheets than just one person. That's multiple departments. You have the R&D, the marketing, and there's several different people involved there. We're aiming to put out a template that others can maybe potentially follow suit to down the road as new products come out. Maybe they could adhere to that template so that the end user has an easier time digesting that information and coming up with that purchase decision.
Because you're just at the beginning of stages of this, I would think that you're still learning as you go. And is there anything that the consumers of this information need to be aware of in terms of what's missing or what hasn't been easy to collect from what the manufacturers are publishing?
That's a good question. At the moment, we're only focused on the information that is provided to us, right? So, in thinking of things from a constant standpoint of user new to the industry, right? I'm trying to forget my 12 years of survey experience and 6 years of reality capture, right? And basically presume that I have 20-year amnesia, but I'm interested in this field. What would help me make a decision? Now, understanding that there's a lot of technical information that may or may not be there on some manufacturers' sheets, does that affect my ability to still make a purchase decision? So, as I think things evolve, we'll try to get more information included. But for right now, we're happy with what's presented and just trying to put that in the easiest to understand light possible.
So it's something that you're still it's going to be an ongoing process, right? Like this is something that the committee is going to need to be diligent to keep up with, to make sure that everything stays current, to make sure that as new technology comes out, which seems like it's pretty often, that those specifications are updated. And so I think on the part of the user, the new user coming in, they're going to need to be diligent as well to double check.
Correct. Yeah, double check whenever, you're coming into something, do your research, do your homework, find some people to talk to and then get some opinions, right? So you're not just going off of one point of contacts information. But I agree that, the field is evolving. If we look at where it's come in just the last 10 years, there's a lot more products that are about there on the market. There's a lot more competition in terms of the manufacturers. Slam is becoming more of a thing. Now we have Gaussian splats and photogrammetry. So things have really exponentially grown. Now, with that, if there's not that standard base to go to, you can get lost in the shuffle of all the new hyperbole that's been put out there. What we'd like to do as the committee is bring it back down to a base framework. Let's do some testing, right? As people are starting to get into a new area, let's say SLAM, for instance, is really starting to gain traction. Last year at GeoWeek, we took 20 sensors from SLAM and terrestrial and put them through the same course during the same time frame. So what we were able to do in the end is show the same slices of data from the same source from 20 different sensors and then say, okay, if this meets the requirement of your client's needs, maybe this is a product that's worthwhile for you. And in our comparison, we also did a 5-year cost of ownership. So, what does this cost to acquire? What do you need for software, maintenance? And then at the end of 5 years, what's your total cost of ownership? So you can have a both short term and long term, kind of set plan for what things are going to cost and how you're going to be able to recoup that money. Is this the best product for my customer base? And is this going to give them an outstanding deliverable?
That sounds like a great approach. And that total cost of ownership, of course, is so important. That's not something that a lot of people think about going into it. It's really easy to compare the initial price. What am I going to have to spend to get this technology? But when you think about it in terms of total cost of ownership, that changes the discussion a little bit. And it also sounds like the committee is advocating, yes, you're doing all this work to develop this specification sheet to make it easy to compare at a glance, but at the end of the day, you still have to get your hands on the technology before you make that decision.
Yes, 100%. I'm all in favor of doing a demo. And not just the demo where you have the salesperson come out and scan the boardroom, but more in-depth demo where you take it on site and you do, some heavy lifting with the potential unit that you want to buy, and actually put it through its paces and see. More than anything, I think now it's not the hardware, it's the overall workflow, right? How easy is it to acquire the data that you need? Does it meet the specifications of your customer or your client? And does it fit into your existing structure that you have now? You're not going to have to change operating systems for everything on your systems. You're not going to have to go from Windows to Mac and totally change everything on the back end. You're not going to have to potentially go out and buy a dedicated computer just to run one thing, right? We're trying to look at everything as a whole and understand that workflow from beginning to end is where the industry is now in terms of focus. Whereas maybe 5 years ago, you would come across someone that had 10 different hardware products, three different softwares, and now they've combined all that down into maybe one or two pieces of hardware and one software. So, really streamlining the workflow.
And I would think a question that you're starting to get increasingly as well is how much automation is embedded in that workflow? How much artificial intelligence is embedded in the workflow? How much can I get the software to do for me so that I don't need to do all that heavy lifting once I capture the data?
Right. And that's one of the things that scares me about where the industry is in headspace and moving forward. Everyone seems to be bringing up AI, and they want to automate things and they want things to move forward faster and easier. They want that staples, right? That one button that's the easy button gets it done. I'm afraid for what the industry could turn into in 5, 10 years if all we focus on is AI and not the foundation of understanding what this equipment is doing, right? We can let AI run as many algorithms and things in the background as it wants to and be as hands off as possible. But how do we QA/QC the AI? Right? How do we quantify that output to our customer if they say something went wrong? We don't have a person to say, oh, yeah, I recognize between scan 100 and 200 that, we had a little bit of an error, but it's contained to just that spot. If everything's automated, people are just going to look at the numbers and the numbers can lie to you. It's that visual, let's get into the true slice and let's look at things, millimeter thin slices and look for any misalignments or mismatches. Relying on AI for all of that is kind of scary to me just because it's unproven and it seems to take the educated user out of the equation.
Well, I think we're all in this space right now where we're trying to figure out where does AI come into play? Where does it provide the most value? And where do we as humans really need to maintain some level of control? And when you think about where reality capture has come, especially over the last 6 to 10 years, right? It's really been the people with the vision for how to apply it. That has led to some amazing applications of reality capture. I'm sure you've seen that in your own career. You mentioned that
Mhm.
really your focus for the last 6 years has been in reality capture. So even just within that time, I'm sure you've seen some amazing some amazing applications of reality capture just because of the human imagination and the potential to explore that you really can't get with AI, right?
Yeah, exactly. The curiosity factor, right? So a lot of my colleagues and I are of the same mindset that if we have a scanner, we're going to keep it with us 100% of the time. You never know when you might see something and go, huh, I want to scan that. A perfect illustration is the Go Geomatics conference held back in October in Calgary. I went and a couple of colleagues said, hey, meet us down at this building. We're going to scan this face. It was a wired frame in the shape of a head out in front of a rather large building in downtown Calgary. So we had talked to some people at the event and they were all familiar with it. We said, well, what sex is it? Is that a guy or a girl? Can you tell? Is it a, older person, younger person? Nobody had any idea. What we had done was we took the laser scan of it and then we turned it into a watertight mesh. And it wasn't until we did that and we got a different context that we could see clearly that it was a woman with her hair parted in the middle, but put into a bun in the back, parted around her ear on one side. Whereas just a wire, framework with a white plastic exterior coating on it, you couldn't tell anything other than it was supposed to be a human head. But once we changed the context and we looked at it out of curiosity, what would happen if we turned it to a watertight mesh? Now we could see something completely different. And it was only born out of that curiosity that we got to that point. And
That
that's what I'm
curiosity.
afraid of.
Yeah. That curiosity factor is so important. Now, with the committee's focus on the certification side of things, how do you weave that in? I mean, that's such a soft skill, right? Curiosity. You can't train someone to bring curiosity to the mix. So how do you embed that into this idea for providing a certification for laser scanning?
So, one of the things in our certification is to understand what it does, right? What is laser scanning? How is using light as a method of data capture beneficial in this particular instance or not, right? Once they've got that, then we want to do the practical application. Okay, you understand how the laser scanner works in all of its most basic parts. Now let's get creative, let's get curious, right? So it's in that practical application that we would like to teach that curiosity factor of don't just push the button for whatever the resolution is and only follow a set template. Get creative with it. I've found in my getting creative, I can avoid mirrored images in bathrooms simply by changing where I put my scanner, not by my resolution setting, just by where I put it. And by where, I don't mean where I put the tripod, meaning take the scanner off the tripod, put it on the ground, right? So I'm changing where it sits in the space, not the resolution, but where it actually is gaining its reference from. And in doing so, I've been able to capture more high quality data in less time with less noise than by other methods, that someone would just walk in and conventionally set it down and walk away. Well, I'm, always curious to how can I make this better? How can I make it, take one less scan but get more data? How can I make the cleanup faster, the registration tighter? So I try those things out of curiosity when I'm in the field. If it works, awesome. And then I try to teach that moving forward to others so they can benefit from it as well.
Sure. So again, that curiosity factor is so important. Just asking those questions and really trying some different things. And that's what sets people apart in this field, I think, is when you're willing to push the technology, continue to ask questions, and just see what's possible.
Right. That what happens if I do this, right? As long as it's not a catastrophic ending, you may be onto something that could be beneficial for more people than just yourself, right? So give it a shot, try it, put it out there, see what the response is. If it's something that, not to use the term game changer, but if it's something that is very beneficial in a workflow, put it out there and then let the manufacturers try to take that idea and evolve it into a new product or a new workflow with existing products for everyone else to benefit from. So you just never really know until you try.
Sure. Now, I would think for any organizations that are listening to this interview that have seen that the committee is working toward a certification, that they're very interested in taking a look at those first certified individuals to bring them on board. How long, what kind of time frame are we looking at before people are able to get a certification from the committee?
Ooh, it's a very good question. So we're currently in talks with a couple of different universities to get our material included. What we're looking at right now is what does that look like on the back end? Because there's different regulations and rules in place for different states or provinces within just North America. So we're trying to find out what do we need to do to get, not necessarily per se accredited, but get our material in a fashion that is the most easily digestible by these universities that would be interested. So we're working on getting our content published with an ISBN so that we can then basically sell that content to colleges and universities to be included as supplemental materials, like as end of year. Hey, we've gone through this book. Now we're going to do this supplemental material to kind of add on, and then from there we would have the opportunity to do that in person actual application, and that's where we would give the certification course in the final paperwork. So I would say we're maybe a year out from being able to do that in-person certification, earliest would probably be 2026 at Geo Week.
Okay, interesting. And then what about for someone who's already a practicing professional? Are they going to have access to take these certification materials and earn a certification as well? Or are these materials only going to be available through colleges and universities?
No, we would make that available as well for existing users that just want to be able to say that they have a certification. One of the things that we've highlighted as being very important is to give the newest generation the leg up going into their chosen field by giving them a foundational knowledge base to work off of. Whereas now there is no degree in reality capture or in laser scanning. You essentially get yourself on board with a company that's doing it. Maybe you have a crossover skill survey, for instance, and then you get into reality capture that way. But you're taught by those people that you're working with. Well, who taught them? Were they taught by a sales rep during a 1 hour training? Is that intense enough and inclusive enough to say that that person is a qualified scan tech? Right. So those are some of the questions that we have. We're also not trying to go after 15, 20-year veterans and tell them that they're doing things wrong, because they're not. They made their own workflow given what they had at the moment. And that's one of the things that really stuck with me from survey, is that when you're a surveyor, you might have to drive 3 hours out to the job site. Well, what happens if your total station batteries are dead, or you end up being on the south side of a or north side of a hill and you have zero satellites for GPS? What do you have in the truck that can enable you to get work done, and then you can come back later and tighten it up, right? So being able to use what you have available to you at the moment to get the most work done at that time. Right. That's
And I
what
would
those
think
guys
that
were striking
also,
with. We're not trying to tell them, you need to change your workflow. We understand where they came from, but we'll still certify them in knowing all of the background information.
I would think that you're also having to be technology agnostic with that certification as well, because there's value. There's a lot of value for organizations to hire someone who is certified in the Leica laser scanning workflow. But I would imagine that there's also a need for just a general like data management, because that's where a lot of the magic happens now, right? Isn't the data management in the workflow? And is it possible to do that apart from a brand?
I think it's possible to do that apart from a brand, understanding that each manufacturer might have a different data collection technique, right? Or there's different variations between the manufacturers. We're all using the same technology, but I hate to go back to it, but the automotive industry is the best on par that I can give, in that we're all in the same industry, but you have slightly different variations between like a Chevy and a Jeep, right? Like they each have their own flavor, they have their own characteristic, and they have their own distinguishing factors to them. All of that aside, the basic piece of equipment does the exact same thing, right? Regardless of the flavor, the flare, the color of the unit, they all basically do the same thing. So we understand that there's people that have been around in the industry for 10, 15 years or longer, that they've had to adopt as the technology came out. They've gotten um, a workflow in place based on what they had to do the most with what they had, right, at that time.
Fair enough. How would someone get involved in the committee? I mean, it sounds like an exclusive little group. How big is it, first of all? And then if someone else wants to get involved, how would they do that?
Okay. So the committee has been invite only for the past year and a half. We really kind of branched out on our own after Geo Week of 2024. But we've basically been invite anyone with a like mindset that wants to see the industry grow to be the most that it can be, before any kind of government or other body would come in and say, hey, you have to do this. right? Right now, we're kind of the Wild West where there are no rules and regulations per se on our industry. We're self regulating, and we'd like to make sure that we regulate in such a direction that it moves everyone forward and not in favor of just bigger companies. So, anyone is available to come and sit in on one of our meetings. We have bi-weekly meetings on Tuesdays, and I can give you, a link to share with everyone that is open. So if someone wants to come sit in, all we ask for is your opinion and your pain points. That's it.
Well, and speaking of pain points, I'm sure you hear quite a few of those in your position as a support specialist for Leica Geosystems. What is the most common pain point that you hear from people when they're trying to work with reality capture?
Hmm. So there's a couple of pain points. One that comes up a lot is registration and trying to get things to be tighter for client goals, right? So talking to a lot of people about don't be afraid to take more scans than what you need, or you can always thin it out later. I tell people it's better to decimate than interpolate, right? We can get rid of excess points, but it's not good to always rely on interpolating between points that are there to try to figure out what's not, right? So let's gather more data. We can always thin it out rather than try to say, well, it should be here. Well, should be is not a quantifiable metric, right? We can say with so much degree of certainty that this is where that point is. So let's capture all of that data, thin it out later, and then if you really, really need to quantify it and show tight data and control your Z values, then the inclusion of survey and using survey total station to shoot in your targets and hold that as a control to the entirety of the project. So those are two of the big ones that I think come up a lot. Other than that, a lot of it is field related with the data collector and the field 360 workflow. Some people I think get hung up too much on the tech, where put the tablet down and just go scan, right? It's not going to um, prohibit you from scanning. You just might have to spend a little extra time in the office to figure it out later, whereas it's not coming together easily on the iPad or on your phone, right? So ditch the tech and just go back to the old way, push the button, get the data, and then figure it out when you get back.
Yeah, again, great examples of where the human factor comes into play. You still need to understand what it is you're doing. You need to understand what the client needs. At the end of the day, that's the driving factor, right? What is the objective with this project? And then there are so many different ways to accomplish that using the technology, because the technology is very powerful, but you have to understand what you're doing to get there.
Yes, very, very much so.
What are you most excited about as you look ahead, maybe 5 years down the road, with all the change that's taking place? I mean, you mentioned AI is a little concerning because of how people want to apply it, but what are you excited about? Because there's a lot of exciting things on the horizon as well.
I'm really excited to see where the form factor and the technology is going to go. Things are getting smaller, lighter, a lot more portable, getting faster in terms of the data acquisition just in like the last 10 years. And also the application of reality capture and point clouds in industry. So starting out, a lot of surveyors were like, ooh, maybe kind of adopted it. AEC for your architects and engineering construction, they started to adopt it. And now we've got forestry and also some medical professionals. There's some of my colleagues have been working on some medical applications for laser scanning that if you would have asked me 4 or 5 years ago, I would have been like, what? Why would you do that? Like, why would you even try that? And now it's why not? So just the curiosity factor, really. What are people going to do with this technology that we've not thought of? And what kind of, awesome wow factor deliverables are they going to be able to create?
Yeah, always stay curious. Again, medical applications, that's so fascinating. And Chris, I just have to ask you because you do work for like a geosystem. So even though you're doing all of this work for the industry, trying to stay brand agnostic, You work for Leica, and so I have to ask you why? Why Leica? What is it that Leica brings to the table? What stands out to you?
I've always had, I guess, an affinity for Leica starting back in my survey days. Loved the Leica total stations, and then anytime had an interaction with a sales rep because we were getting, new equipment or something like that. I just always liked that they came and they sat down and they just had a conversation with you, and they'd go, as far down the rabbit hole with you as you wanted to go, but they didn't leave until you had a base understanding of what it was that equipment did. And that was my first real taste to Leica. And then getting into the industry and using the scanners, calling into support at that time when I was just basically a customer. The whole feeling that I got from everyone that I had dealt with was that they were vested in my success with that product, and that really meant something to me. And then coming on board, understanding all of the intricacies of the business side of things, my goal is really just to have that same vested interest in the success of the users. um, what can we get done with this technology now that we didn't think was ever possible before, and then where are we going to push it in the next 5 years to continue that advanced application.
Yeah, that's so great. It's great to see that people like you in the industry are really trying to push things forward for everyone, because it benefits everyone who's trying to apply this technology, who's thinking of different ways that they might be able to use it. Now, I see in the background you have a number of what looks like tags from events, like name tags from events. It looks like you probably attend a lot of different things. Where can people find you?
Correct. So that's from a couple of years worth of trade shows and going to as many as I could to either speak, present, be involved in some kind of a testing, or just to go and sit in the audience and gain information. So for anyone interested in going to conferences and running into me, at the moment, I will be pretty much annually at GeoWeek in Denver as of right now in February, also the Go Geomatics in Calgary in October, and potentially some other more Leica specific events coming up in the future. But for this coming year, 2025 GeoWeek, myself and the committee will be on the main floor at one of the tables in the lobby area next to the tubes full of random things that have been found on the highway, such as sand and straw. If you go to the Denver Convention Center, you'll see it on your way, and you'll see us at a booth that says not registration, or the committee, depending on if we can get our tabletop banner put up in time.
That sounds great. Well, I'm sure a lot of our listeners will look for you there. Chris, this has been a fantastic discussion. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. And I hope to have you on the program again at some point in the future.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed it.
Be sure to check out the description for additional resources on this topic. If you enjoyed this content, give us a like. If you'd like to see more of this content, be sure you subscribe. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time on The Tech Insider.